Disparity got played on a Reddit playtesting session the other day. I was kindly invited for a game where I proceeded to get my ass kicked, but it was an enjoyable and, perhaps more importantly, educational experience. I've played the map for countless hours over the past months, but it felt different when playing with skilled players in a proper 5v5 environment. This video has several purposes. Firstly, I'd like to thank the hosts on Reddit and everybody who played the map. I can't think of a better opportunity to get feedback on it. The entire session was very well run and I enjoyed it a lot. Secondly, I'd like to talk about the feedback and how I've changed the map. It's sad that most maps are released and then generally ignored. How is the mapper supposed to get better if they don't know where they're going wrong? Even with feedback, playtesters are only often around for a couple of versions before getting bored. And this is the problem. A map isn't ever really finished. Time and time again I've made tiny adjustments to the map and I'm like, yep, definitely finished this time. Only for people to get back to me with perhaps 100 bugs and decent suggestions for me to include in the next version. But also from the playtester's point of view, if they're only trying out the map once or twice, their feedback is only really telling part of the story. I don't think that you can give fair opinions on the balance of the map after just 1 or 2 games. We've all played matches on a map where we found one side easier than the other, only for the roles to be reversed in the next game for no apparent reason. Particularly if the map tries new ideas, it can often take several matches for players to become acquainted with the layout, and even more for advanced tactics to appear. It's easy to say that it's unbalanced because one type of attack trumps a certain type of defence, but all it takes is a discovery of a new position for it to potentially flip the balance on its head. In particular is this section down middle. People have complained about how vulnerable CTs are when rushing to B, even though there's another route down around the back that takes a bit longer. I want people to have to make difficult decisions. The middle of this map is a high risk, high reward area. At the beginning of the match I played, players would rush to both bomb sites, but after a couple of rounds several players would hang around in middle since it's such a valuable area to hold and allows for quick rotates to either bomb site. Disparity is a very small map. This is deliberate. It's the opposite of a map like Nuke where there's a lot of running about before you get to a fight. This makes Disparity very fast paced. As CTs, you have the time to rotate around through terrorist spawn, which really adds another layer of sneakiness to the gameplay. I felt overwhelmed at points during the playtesting, but like I said, it takes time to get acquainted with tactics, and I feel it served as a refreshing change from the large, slow-paced maps that I'm used to. That being said, I have made one major change to the map following the Reddit night. I've closed up yet another passage in middle which should delay terrorists by a second or so. Whether this is better or worse remains to be seen, but it will stall terrorists who want to rush A, and will make the other routes more attractive. Even now it's not perfect. The adjustment is boxy and a bit of the graffiti has been cut off, but gameplay wise it's potentially a step in the right direction, and I'm working on further improvements in even later versions of the map. A knock-on bonus from this change is that I've been able to further optimise middle, which should boost frame rates. I've learnt time and time again that it takes a lot of change to radically alter how a map feels. They aren't the finely tuned, fragile things that I thought they were a couple of years ago. Overpass is a great example of a map that has undergone several large changes and yet is still Overpass at the end of it, but slightly better. It was nice to have a feedback page for people to post suggestions after the Reddit night. I've tried my best to fix as many of the issues as possible and have replied to many individuals on this page. I'm not spoiling for an argument and defending my map, or at least I hope I'm not. I hope that I've made their suggestions feel appreciated by mentioning what I've changed and what I've kept the same, and why, in a bid to help them to understand the thought process that goes on when adjusting a map. I've also closed up a couple of corners since the fewer places somebody has to check, the fairer the firefights are. I hate being shot in the back or from a dark, distant corner as much as the next person. This means that the last garage spot has had to go. It's been replaced with a tree, but people have already pointed out that the branches are sticking through the walls in places, which I'll try to fix for the next update. The remaining 2 entrances to the middle house are rather narrow. The reason for this can be seen going way back to the original version of the map, where these weren't even the main routes through the area. Now they are, I may widen both of them to stop players from blocking each other. For now I've just made this snow easier to climb. It's a messy part of the map that's been causing me problems for a while. I've never had a problem with this, but I've been told that Bombsite A has issues with HDR and that it's hard to see players against the dark cliff face. I've added a light and some white paint to the cliff. This really is a strange town. I heard a nice little suggestion about naming this part of the map Seahorse, since there's a memorable little mark on the wall. Unfortunately it's got white paint on it at the moment, but here's the same one in CT Spawn. I have also replaced the white wall with a brickier one here since the HDR was too great for some people. That being said, there's now reduced contrast, so perhaps it's harder to spot people against it? I haven't named parts of the map yet. This is mainly because the nav mesh is a nightmare to adjust, but it's also because I think that the best names crop up naturally. If I tried naming places myself, I'd call them something silly like Meow Beans or Yum Yum. I'm still stubborn about Short A being called Short A and not Catwalk. As somebody else said, the map's small and simple and areas are varied as they are, so it's not hard to understand where places are when somebody calls them out. I will add proper names to them at some point, honest. This is an interesting one. Apparently somebody tried jumping through this hole in a match and was disappointed. I have now removed it to prevent confusion, further simplifying and optimising the area. I try to include as many suggestions as possible, but sometimes it can't be done. A lot of people point out the tiniest of problems and I look at it and go, is it even worth fixing? This sort of issue arises when you have a lot of detail. Compare a Mario level to Crysis 3. I'm sure you could find 1,000 more bugs with the latter's levels just because there's more that could go wrong. As you add more, it gets easier and easier to fault. It's just one of those annoying issues in life. Speaking of which, I fixed the annoying error that people got after minimising the game. Apparently Source doesn't like textures on displacements, so I've gone back to the more basic roof model and it's fixed the issue. It just means that it doesn't look quite as good. I feel like removing displacements from the roof areas completely since they cause another type of graphical glitch as well. I'm not alone in this, you'll find one on the aptly named Mirage as well. There are sudden changes to the colour of the snow in places. This has been a real problem for me and I'm not sure how to 100% fix it. I've reduced how obvious these joints are by moving the displacements about and by remaking some sections, but it's a bit like pushing air bubbles about underneath a sticker. They've still got to go somewhere it seems. It's something that's easy to point out but difficult to fix, and I'll continue on making these joins less obvious. And now for this spot. I haven't removed it. This can seem like an obvious exploit that should be removed immediately, but should it? There's another like it in Bombsite A as well, but it takes 3 people to get up onto it. Both are hard to achieve in the heat of battle, and I almost feel as though they could balance themselves. If it becomes too popular a place, then people will end up looking there first, and therefore won't be as appealing. It's one of those things that really needs experienced playtesters to decide whether or not it should be in the level. Similar places in maps like Cache and Inferno lead to interesting situations. Is it really worth removing every spot that gives you an advantage, or will it just make the map boring? That's it really. The final thing I'm going to cover are the small bugs. I've had a couple of faithful playtesters send me every single graphical glitch they found, down to the edges of displacements, oddly placed plants and specks of ice on models. Thanks to these kind of posts, I've added small graphical tweaks across the map, like adding detail to corners or moving props so that they don't stick through walls. Look at the barrels in the corner. I was told that the shadow was a bit overpowering, but in a way I like it. It kind of simulates ambient occlusion. Perhaps I'll add it back at some point. And then there are the sweet, genuine suggestions. At T-Spawn, I wanted a cheap way of making an interior. I settled on an exit sign. What I love about these things is that it really stirs up some people's imaginations. I was told that it would be nice to have a room in there with seats and the like. I know that it's extra pointless detail that will simply sap frame rates, and I question if it would even be visible, but I did it nonetheless. I added some chairs which can't actually be seen in game at all. They fade out as you step away from them so they're not too hard on your frame rate. I guess I'll remove them at some point, but it seems a shame for some reason. That concludes this video. Once again, thanks to everybody who has helped make Disparity what it is. Unfortunately, it hasn't been included in the next operation, or if it has, I don't know about it. Also, it's my birthday today. Maybe next year, Valve.
One's lower. Sorry, I just... Yeah, that was me.
What? One stairs, one stairs.
Jet?
Nice, Septic. We've got it, Tech 9 too strong.
One's upper.
Oh my god. Imagine how...
Upper. Yeah, one's upper.
Top.
Oh yes, imagine
Upper
using
set.
scroll fire with this.
Oh, behind
Connector.
Remember today.
Good game.
Tech 9 too strong.